They left him lying in the street, in the gutter.
What's the address of your emergency?
In Thomasville. Somebody looked like they'd been shot in the head. Laying on the ground. People around till they heard a gunshot.
I don't hate you. I can't hate you. It's not our way. Showing rahmah, mercy, that is our way. And you were a baby, and you are still a child. His death was already ordained. Maybe the purpose is to save your life, because you're not going to be killed by this society. My family would like very much to be a part of your seeing a better way of life so that this does not repeat itself. Because I will always be a part of your life. Any life that you take is not just one life. It is all that is connected to that life.
And what we want for them is not revenge. Revenge solves nothing. It will not bring back my son.
If I do, I want to tell you I'm sorry.
You can only see how to help them when you have forgiven, truly from your heart.
The couple convicted of terrorizing a child's birthday party is going to prison for their part in the racially motivated crime. Channel 2's Taisha Fernandez is live in Douglas County. And Taisha, the courtroom was filled with tears today.
Jovita, this was an extremely intense and emotional court hearing. People were emotional on both sides. Two mothers faced off, the mother of the victim and the mother of the defendant. They addressed each other in court today.
in prison.
Jose Torres and Kayla Norton cried throughout this entire sentencing hearing. The judge said their crimes were racially motivated and filled with hate, and then sentenced both of them to more prison time than the state was asking for. Torres got 13 years, Norton got 6. Norton is a mother of 3 young children. She said she accepts responsibility and said not walking away from the situation on July 25, 2015 was the worst decision of her life. The couple was part of a large group the judge called white supremacists. This Facebook video helped a grand jury indict them. Their pickup trucks flying Confederate battle flags pulled up to a birthday party for a black child in Douglasville. A jury found them guilty of several charges, including yelling racial slurs, threatening to kill partygoers, including the kids.
But I want you all to know that that is not me. That is not me. That's not him. I would never walk up to you and say those words to you, and I'm so sorry that that happened to you. I'm so sorry.
The apology caused some. Ultimately, mother to mother, she said this.
I forgive you. I forgive all of you. I'm not a mean spirit. I do. I forgive you.
There were more than a dozen people involved in this incident. The 2 you just heard about sentenced today. There were 2 more people charged with felonies. They pleaded guilty and are now serving shorter terms. We're live outside the Douglas County Courthouse. Taisha Fernandez, Channel 2 Action News.
Lessons learned, Taisha. Thank you.
He's had power over my life for 4 years, and I've struggled for 4 years. He don't get that power today, so no, I don't have anything to say to him.
Emotions run high as the man convicted of brutal murders in 2013 is sentenced to death, the first death penalty imposed since Nebraskans voted to bring it back. Nico Jenkins had a lot to say in court throughout the last 4 years, but today he was noticeably quiet.
A judge methodically explained why capital punishment is justified, citing a bunch of factors, including that the 4-time killer has shown no remorse. Miranda Christian was in the courtroom. She has the sentence and reaction.
This case has been delayed for years, leaving 4 families wondering what will happen to the man who killed their loved ones.
This panel finds that the death penalty is appropriate, should be, and is hereby given for each of the 4 murders by the defendant.
4 death sentences and another 12 convictions, each with 45 to 50 years in prison. That is what the 3-panel judge ruled in the Nico Jenkins case.
The defendant's commission of these 4 murders over a 10-day period is one of the worst killing sprees in the history of this state.
You don't get the glory today. I get the glory. My family gets the glory. God gets the glory.
The mother of victim Curtis Bradford was emotional after the verdict.
This has been too long. 4 years is a long time.
She says it's time to move on and let go of what Nico Jenkins did to her family.
I absolutely, one thing to say to him, he's had power over my life for 4 years, and I've struggled for 4 years. He don't get that power today.
Douglas County Attorney Don Klein says Jenkins is one of the most manipulative personalities they have ever seen.
And his history is a very dangerous person. And like I said, that's part of this process that the court found that he deserved the maximum punishments.
The 3 judges had to weigh his past, like his family history and mental illness, against the severity of his crimes. They also compared this case to others in the past.
Each one of these murders was a deliberate and planned act. The victims were pre-selected and the murders were purposeful.
And now it's a time for healing and for these families to maybe have some closure after 4 long years.
I'm ready to go home and heal. That's what I want to do. I'm tired, I'm weary, and I'm ready to go home. I don't never want to see this place here again.
Even if Nico Jenkins isn't executed, he will still have to serve a minimum of 450 years in prison for his felony convictions. Reporting at the Douglas County Courthouse, I'm Miranda Christian, 3 News Now.
Gang rapist Bilal Hajid showed no remorse during his trial and even smiled when he was sentenced to at least 15 years jail. Hajid is now a free man and found himself a job. So why is he trying to weasel out of paying his victim the compensation she deserves?
You know what you are? You're the lowest of all kind.
Really?
Yeah, you are.
That's coming from a convicted rapist.
Mate, you're lower than scum.
This man belonged to the gang behind a series of sickening attacks that shocked Australia.
The SCAF gang rapes are one of those items that is a mark in social history as to where the community was appalled and we all saw that there was a degeneration in community standards.
One of 9 deranged lowlives convicted and locked up for an unprecedented 240 years.
Are you sorry?
Mate, what am I sorry about?
We know he's not sorry for what he's done. He's just sorry that you fronted him.
For the first time on TV, face to face with a notorious SCAF gang member.
Well, feel like answering any questions today?
Does this pack rapist regret his low act?
Hey, look down this camera here and say you're sorry to this woman.
And why are you picking up Bilal's bill for victim compensation?
Back.
Can you afford more?
Of course.
He's not paying his debt. We are.
Take a good look at these eyes, because 2 women will never forget them.
It's about time someone stood up and said it was wrong.
18 years ago, on the eve of the Sydney Olympics, Bilal Hajid was one of the Lebanese youths whose atrocities rocked the nation. The racially motivated sex attacks on Australian females became known as the SCAF gang rapes.
Can you talk over here?
Yeah, come on, let's talk.
What do you think?
Made you feel safer in a gang?
You're obviously bored. I think you guys should leave.
Mate, were you bored that night with you and your mates?
18 years after.
Yeah?
After.
Show a bit of remorse.
Mate, I'm actually... Mate, I did...
Hey, look down this camera here and say you're sorry to this woman.
Mate,
why not?
Mate, you've got the wrong person.
Hajid's had plenty of time to think about his depraved rampage, so we were keen to see if he was ready to apologise.
Are you sorry?
Mate, what am I sorry about? I've done my time, I've done whatever it is.
Do you have any remorse for this woman?
Mate, I've done my, paid my debt to society.
Hey, look down this camera here and say you're sorry to this woman. You asked me what I'm after. I think I'm after an apology here on behalf of this woman.
Why should I apologise to you? Who are you to me? Mate, I did 14 years jail.
Yeah. But why not say sorry to her? Do you have any remorse
I'm
for this
honouring
woman?
what they said.
Can you look
no,
down
just
that
hold on.
camera
Just
and
I'm
say
talking
sorry?
to you. You asked me
Okay.
to look at you?
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking at you in the eye. What more do you want from me?
Maybe an apology for the woman whose life you destroyed. Just right down that camera.
Mate, just, can you finish now?
You've given me an
Wrap
answer,
this up?
but no sorry. So no apology. You're not sorry. All you've told me is that you've done your time.
Exactly.
I think, mate,
yes,
that Australia would like to know
yes.
whether you're sorry or not.
Whether I'm sorry or not?
Correct.
Okay.
Look, if you're not willing to say sorry, then we'll be
so
on
what
the
do
road,
you...
let you go back to work.
A dirty dozen denials. And Hajid probably won't be saying sorry next month either, when he fronts court on fresh charges of stalking, common assault and malicious damage involving a female alleged victim.
What are you on about?
One of Hajib's rape victims received $100,000 from the government's Victims Compensation Fund for her ordeal. Hajid was ordered to reimburse taxpayers the full amount, but managed to talk his way down to just $6,000. Hajid argued, as a gang rapist, the money owed should be split between the members of the evil pack.
Do you believe you deserve a group discount for a gang rape?
Mate, I'm not answering any question for matters that have been dealt with in the past.
Oh, it's a current matter.
No, it's not.
Do you feel you don't have to pay for this crime because it was a gang rape? And you deserve a group discount? Is that what's happening?
Mate, your information is incorrect.
Now, why hide your eyes? Look me in the eye.
Well, it's not just the victim he's snubbing. He's snubbing the entire community because we're paying for him. This is one of the problems.
Victims advocate Howard Brown says government organisations around the country responsible for making criminals pay up are letting taxpayers down and giving crooks a free ride.
We pay for their accommodation in jail and we pay for their compensation because they won't pay for either.
Can you afford more?
Of course.
You can afford more. Well, why don't you pay more back?
Mate, there is a deal in place with the Commissioner.
The New South Wales Commissioner of Victims' Rights is responsible for giving the rapist his massive discount. But Hajid wasn't about to stop there. He then tried to get out of having to reimburse taxpayers the tiny amount by declaring bankruptcy.
However, the Commissioner ruled the $6,000 debt stood, which Hajid's now paying off at $80 a month. It'll take Bilal 6 1/4 years to settle his bill, leaving taxpayers to foot the remaining $94,000.
So you believe $6,000 compensates for...
Mate, I don't
you and your
believe
mate's debt?
anything. I'm honouring what the judge has said. Steve Marshall?
Yeah.
You'll be hearing from my lawyers.
Good.
They simply can't afford to pay.
Ahmed Dib is Hajid's lawyer. For the record, he did not represent him during the rape trials.
People often who have found themselves behind bars are often in a position that they're not a great financial position.
The outrageous irony is if I stay any longer than 2 hours in this car spot, it's likely I'll cop a hefty fine. And no matter how hard up I am, I'll still have to pay the full amount. But these days, when it comes to the hideous crime of gang rape, 94% off is the going rate.
It's a national disgrace. Every year, more than $200 million of taxpayers' money is paid in compensation to victims of crime. And every year, crooks reimburse just a tiny fraction of the bill. Joining Hajid on the dirtbag discount list in the past year are taxi driver rapist Adam Budgeruddin, a $15,000 discount. Wife beaters Christopher Jackson and Wee Dong Xiong both saved $5,000. Theron Hawker, $6,000 for assault. And Marcus Prompromus had $5,000 knocked off his victim's compo bill, also for assault.
That tells me that the organisation responsible for chasing that restitution is not doing a very good job.
Mark Speakman, the New South Wales Attorney General responsible for Hajid's case, told A Current Affair the government is now cracking down on criminals trying to dodge their repayments.
The sentences imposed upon offenders are their primary punishment, but they should also pay as much as they can to help their victims recover. The amount recovered from offenders has risen from $3.8 million to more than $9 million so far this financial year.
Hopefully one day somebody who could be a genius may be able to figure a solution that would be able to benefit the victims more so than what they are currently being benefited, that would also be a viable option.
Bilal Hajid is a maintenance worker at a local council. He's got a decent roof over his head and drives a couple of cars, like this one sporting the proud Aussie sticker.
You guys believe in second chances. Isn't that what you guys say in Australia? People believe in second chances.
What chance did you give her
Mate,
in life?
What?
Do you think gang rape just goes away after 18 years?
Do you think you could go away?
Well, Bilal Hajid, that's a question your victims have been asking their demons every night for 18 long years.
You should get back to work.
Διότι το να βιάσεις μια γυναίκα δεν είναι έγκλημα σωματικό. Σκοτώνεις την ψυχή της γυναίκας με το βιασμό.
In 1996, when I was 18 years old,
I had the golden opportunity to go on an international exchange program. Ironically, I'm an Australian who prefers proper icy cold weather. So I was both excited and tearful when I got on a plane to Iceland after just having farewelled my parents and brothers goodbye. I was welcomed into the home of a beautiful Icelandic family who took me hiking and helped me get a grasp of the melodic Icelandic language. I struggled a bit with the initial period of homesickness. I snowboarded after school, and I slept a lot. 2 hours of chemistry class in a language that you don't yet fully understand can be a pretty good sedative. My teacher recommended I try out for the school play, just to get a bit more socially active. Turns out I didn't end up being part of the play, but through it I met Þórdís. We shared a lovely teenage romance and would meet at lunchtimes to just hold hands and walk around old downtown Reykjavik. I met her welcoming family, and she met my friends. We'd been in a budding relationship for a bit over a month when our school's Christmas ball was held.
I was 16 and in love for the first time. Going together to the Christmas dance was a public confirmation of our relationship, and I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. No longer a child, but a young woman. High on my newfound maturity, I felt it was only natural to try drinking rum for the first time that night, too. That was a bad idea. I became very ill, drifting in and out of consciousness in between spasms of convulsive vomiting, and the security guards wanted to call me an ambulance. But Tom acted as my knight in shining armor and told them he'd take me home. It was like a fairy tale, his strong arms around me, laying me in the safety of my bed. But the gratitude that I felt towards him soon turned to horror as he proceeded to take off my clothes and get on top of me. My head had cleared up, but my body was still too weak to fight back, and the pain was blinding. I thought I'd be severed in two. In order to stay sane, I silently counted the seconds on my alarm clock. And ever since that night, I've known that there are 7,200 seconds in 2 hours. Despite limping for days and crying for weeks, this incident didn't fit my ideas about rape like I'd seen on TV. Tom wasn't an armed lunatic. He was my boyfriend. And it didn't happen in a seedy alleyway. It happened in my own bed. By the time I could identify what had happened to me as rape, he had completed his exchange program and left for Australia. So I told myself it was pointless to address what had happened. And besides, it had to have been my fault somehow. I was raised in a world where girls are taught that they get raped for a reason. Their skirt was too short. Their smile was too wide. Their breath smelled of alcohol. And I was guilty of all of those things. So the shame had to be mine. It took me years to realize that only one thing could have stopped me from being raped that night, and it wasn't my skirt. It wasn't my smile. It wasn't my childish trust. The only thing that could have stopped me from being raped that night is the man who raped me, had he stopped himself.
I have vague memories of the next day, the after effects of drinking, a certain hollowness that I tried to stifle, nothing more. But I didn't show up at Þórdís's door. It is important to now state that I didn't see my deed for what it was. The word rape didn't echo around my mind as it should have, and I wasn't crucifying myself with memories of the night before. It wasn't so much a conscious refusal, it was more like any acknowledgement of reality was forbidden. My definition of my actions completely refuted any recognition of the immense trauma I'd caused Þórdís. To be honest, I repudiated the entire act in the days afterwards and when I was committing it. I disavowed the truth by convincing myself it was sex and not rape. And this is a lie I felt spine-bending guilt for. I broke up with Þórdís a couple of days later and then saw her a number of times during the remainder of my year in Iceland, feeling a sharp stab of heavy-heartedness each time. Deep down, I knew I'd done something immeasurably wrong. But without planning it, I sunk the memories deep and then I tied a rock to them. What followed is a 9-year period that can best be titled as denial and running, when I got a chance to identify the real torment that I'd caused. I didn't stand still long enough to do so. Whether it be via distraction, substance use, thrill-seeking, or the scrupulous policing of my inner speak, I refused to be static and silent. Amidst this noise, I also drew heavily upon other parts of my life to construct a picture of who I was. I was a surfer, a social science student, a friend to good people, a loved brother and son, an outdoor recreation guide, and eventually a youth worker. I gripped tight to the simple notion that I wasn't a bad person. I didn't think I had this in my bones. I thought I was made up of something else. Of my nurtured upbringing, my loving extended family and role models. People close to me were warm and genuine in their respect shown towards women. It took me a long time to stare down this dark corner of myself and to ask it questions.
9 years after the Christmas dance, I was 25 years old and headed straight for a nervous breakdown. My self-worth was buried under a soul-crushing load of silence that isolated me from everyone that I cared about. And I was consumed with misplaced hatred and anger that I took out on myself. One day, I stormed out of the door in tears after a fight with a loved one, and I wandered into a cafe where I asked the waitress for a pen. I always had a notebook with me, claiming that it was to jot down ideas and moments of inspiration, but the truth was that I needed to be constantly fidgeting, because in moments of stillness, I found myself counting seconds again. But that day, I watched in wonder as the words streamed out of my pen, forming the most pivotal letter I've ever written, addressed to Tom. Along with an account of the violence that he subjected me to, the words, "I want to find forgiveness," stared back at me, surprising nobody more than myself. But deep down I realized that this was my way out of my suffering, because regardless of whether or not he deserved my forgiveness, I deserved peace. My era of shame was over. Before sending the letter, I prepared myself for all kinds of negative responses, or what I found likeliest, no response whatsoever. The only outcome that I didn't prepare myself for was the one that I then got. A typed confession from Tom, full of disarming regret. As it turns out, he too had been imprisoned by silence. And this marked the start of an 8-year-long correspondence that God knows was never easy, but always honest. I relieved myself of the burdens that I'd wrongfully shouldered, and he in turn wholeheartedly owned up to what he'd done. Our written exchanges became a platform to dissect the consequences of that night, and they were everything from gut-wrenching to healing beyond words. And yet, it didn't bring about closure for me. Perhaps because the email format didn't feel personal enough. Perhaps because it's easy to be brave when you're hiding behind a computer screen on the other side of the planet. But we'd begun a dialogue that I felt was necessary to explore to its fullest. So after 8 years of writing, and nearly 16 years after that dire night, I mustered the courage to propose a wild idea, that we'd meet up in person and face our past once and for all.
Iceland and Australia are geographically like this. And in the middle of the two is South Africa. And we decided upon the city of Cape Town, and there we met for 1 week. The city itself proved to be a stunningly powerful environment to focus on reconciliation and forgiveness. Nowhere else has healing and rapprochement been tested like it has in South Africa. As a nation, South Africa sought to sit within the truth of its past and to listen to the details of its history. Knowing this only magnified the effect that Cape Town had on us. Over the course of this week, we literally spoke our life stories to each other, from start to finish. And this was about analysing our own history. We followed a strict policy of being honest. And this also came with a certain exposure and an open-chested vulnerability. There were gutting confessions and moments where we just absolutely couldn't fathom the other person's experience. The seismic effects of sexual violence were spoken aloud and felt, face to face. At other times, though, we found a soaring clarity and even some totally unexpected but liberating laughter. When it came down to it, we did our best to listen to each other intently. And our individual realities were aired with an unfiltered purity that couldn't do any less than lighten the soul.
Wanting to take revenge is a very human emotion, instinctual even. And all I wanted to do for years was to hurt Tom back as deeply as he had hurt me. But had I not found a way out of the hatred and anger, I'm not sure I'd be standing here today. That isn't to say that I didn't have my doubts along the way. When the plane bounced on that landing strip in Cape Town, I remember thinking, why did I not just get myself a therapist and a bottle of vodka like a normal person would do? At times, our search for understanding in Cape Town felt like an impossible quest, and all I wanted to do was to give up and go home to my loving husband Vidit and our son. But despite of our difficulties, this journey did result in a victorious feeling that light had triumphed over darkness, that something constructive could be built out of the ruins. I read somewhere that you should try and be the person that you needed when you were younger. And back when I was a teenager, I would have needed to know that the shame wasn't mine, that there's hope after rape, that you can even find happiness, like I share with my husband today. Which is why I started writing feverishly upon my return from Cape Town, resulting in a book co-authored by Tom that we hope can be of use to people from both ends of the perpetrator-survivor scale. If nothing else, it's a story that we would have needed to hear when we were younger. Given the nature of our story, I know the words that inevitably accompany it. Victim, rapist, and labels are a way to organize concepts, but they can also be dehumanizing in their connotations. Once someone's been deemed a victim, it's that much easier to file them away as someone damaged, dishonored, less than. And likewise, once someone's been branded a rapist, it's that much easier to call him a monster, inhuman. But how will we understand what it is in human societies that produces violence if we refuse to recognize the humanity of those who commit it? And how can we empower survivors if we're making them feel less than? How can we discuss solutions to one of the biggest threats to the lives of women and children around the world if the very words we use are part of the problem?
From what I've now learnt, my actions that night in 1996 were a self-centered taking. I felt deserving of Thotis's body. I've had primarily positive social influences and examples of equitable behaviour around me. But on that occasion, I chose to draw upon the negative ones, the ones that see women as having less intrinsic worth, and of men having some unspoken and symbolic claim to their bodies. These influences I speak of are external to me, though, and it was only me in that room making choices, nobody else. When you own something and really square up to your culpability, I do think a surprising thing can happen. It's what I call a paradox of ownership. I thought I'd buckle under the weight of responsibility, and I thought my certificate of humanity would be burnt. Instead, I was offered to really own what I did and found that it didn't possess the entirety of who I am. Put simply, something you've done doesn't have to constitute the sum of who you are. The noise in my head abated. The indulgent self-pity was starved of oxygen, and it was replaced with the clean air of acceptance. An acceptance that I did hurt this wonderful person standing next to me. An acceptance that I am part of a large and shockingly everyday grouping of men who have been sexually violent towards their partners. Don't underestimate the power of words. Saying to Thordis that I raped her changed my accord with myself as well as with her. But most importantly, the blame transferred from Thordis to me. Far too often the responsibility is attributed to female survivors of sexual violence and not to the males who enact it. Far too often the denial and running leaves all parties at a great distance from the truth. There's definitely a public conversation happening now. And like a lot of people, we're heartened that there's less retreating from this difficult but important discussion. I feel a real responsibility to add our voices to it.
What we did is not a formula that we're prescribing for others. Nobody has the right to tell anyone else how to handle their deepest pain or their greatest error. Breaking your silence is never easy, and depending on where you are in the world, it can even be deadly to speak out about rape. I realize that even the most traumatic event of my life is still a testament to my privilege, because I can talk about it without getting ostracized or even killed. But with that privilege of having a voice comes the responsibility of using it. That's the least I owe my fellow survivors who can't. The story we've just relayed is unique, and yet it is so common, with sexual violence being a global pandemic, but it doesn't have to be that way. One of the things that I found useful in my own healing journey is educating myself about sexual violence. And as a result, I've been reading, writing, and speaking about this issue for over a decade now, going to conferences around the world. And in my experience, the attendees of such events are almost exclusively women. But it's about time that we stop treating sexual violence as a women's issue. A majority of sexual violence against women and men is perpetrated by men, and yet their voices are sorely underrepresented in this discussion. But all of us are needed here. Just imagine all the suffering we could alleviate if we dared to face this issue together. Thank you.
Women as abusers, I've had a request for that. So women are perfectly capable of being abusive, just the same as men. Stats show in America that it's about 50-50. Stats don't suggest that it's more a male thing. Stats suggest that it's 50-50. Domestic abuse, that's when it gets physical, then it is more male. It's all about, any abuse is about control, manipulation, domination over another person, trying to keep the veneer of everything being alright, but underneath they're crumbling and being crushed, and that's intentional. Because it's a pattern, it's not just one thing where we have a bad moment. Nasty, changing mood incredibly quickly, aggressive, 1 minute, sweetie pie the next, really cutting, nasty, getting where it hurts, that's abuse all over. It's not just the not just men that are able to do that, women can do that as well. So I hope that helps. Abuse is abuse is abuse.
Existem entre nós muitos recém-chegados que se surpreendem com forma semelhante ao planeta. Não foram informados que a criação mental é quase tudo em nossa vida? Esquecem que as energias vibram em dimensões e estados diferentes? Sim, a vida continua e as relações entre seres atendem esta verdade, queiram ou não. O bem que fazemos é o nosso advogado pela eternidade.
G'day, from Australia. I would like to talk about an incident that unfortunately occurred in Adelaide Hills, South Australia, on the 28th of June 2018. A man was intentionally run down by his female partner in a shopping centre car park. His body being crushed under the car, trapped, struggling to breathe. A horrific display of domestic violence all captured on CCTV. Domestic violence is unacceptable in today's society, and all around this country there are numerous organisations, both government and privately funded, raising awareness for female victims. We take domestic violence seriously, and it's not tolerated in this country. Or is it?
I said, I'll call the police. She said no, and I was a bit scared. He was yelling, "Get this car off me, I can't breathe."
They managed to jack up the car with another woman who was with the man also becoming involved. Emergency crews eventually racing to the car park of the Littlehampton Marketplace just after 7 p.m. Firefighters and paramedics working to free the trapped victim, who was rushed to the Royal Adelaide Hospital with serious injuries.
I was in so much shock. I was shaking. I didn't know what to do, what to say. I didn't really want to, get involved.
A pretty disgusting and cowardly act, and the incident is probably the most shocking caught on video that I've seen. His body seemingly being folded and twisted underneath the car. So what's the attitude towards this shocking act of domestic violence? Well, a good place to start is usually taking a look at the Facebook comments on the media article itself. You would expect the comments to be of shock and disbelief. "This is what will happen to you if you cheat on me. Be careful. Ha 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 ha. See this? I'll do worse. I'll make sure you're dead. This is hilarious. I'd still be laughing if it were the other way around. Moral of the story, don't cheat." What will happen to you if you cheat on me? Luke, check this out. Laugh out loud. That's what happens to people who choose to be sly and cheat. Yes, true, and I can't even feel sorry for him. Right, understand, no more cheating on me. Always think about your actions, hun. Kiss, kiss. Something I do to my boyfriend. Next person who annoys me is getting run over. Jordan, take note or I'll run you over. Well, you get the idea. The comments were pretty similar throughout the thread. It appears that a man getting intentionally driven over by his female partner is just a joke, and something worthy of a laugh. The majority of women used it as a warning, tagging their partners in the comment section, warning them if they misbehaved that they would face similar treatment. Now just imagine, if that incident had been reversed and it was a woman being run down, and husbands tagging their wives in the thread threatening if they misbehaved that they would face similar treatment. The media would be in an absolute frenzy, triggered, and an emergency government meeting would be taking place on how to deal with this issue. Domestic violence against men in this country is a joke. It's not taken seriously, and attitudes need to change.
Well, I reckon if we get this chain off, we might be in business.
What would you know about bikes, Raymond? You only have to look at the shoddy job you've done on the sprinkler system to see how handy you are. When you get married, don't marry a dud.
Authorised by the Queensland Government, Brisbane.
You're so stupid. You're lucky you have me. Nobody else would ever want you. Oh, shut up. Don't give me that look. You don't know how good you have it. You suck at that. You're never going to amount to anything. Don't you know how much I love you? Abuse can be obvious. It can leave bruises. Abuse can also be less obvious and leave only internal pain and suffering. Whether physical or psychological, abuse is a form of bullying that undermines a person's self-esteem, tears families apart, and takes lives. Almost half of all men and women in the U.S. have experienced psychological abuse by an intimate partner. Many experience it on a daily basis. When people think of domestic violence or relationship abuse, they often think of the stereotypes that go along with it. The truth is, no one is immune to domestic violence. It can affect anyone, no matter what race, gender, socioeconomic background, level of education, religion, or sexual orientation. It is also important to remember that domestic violence is not just physical abuse. In fact, today I'm going to focus on the types of abuse that occur the most, yet are the least talked about: psychological and verbal abuse. I had heard of domestic violence before, but never realized that psychological abuse was just as real as physical abuse. Our society defines domestic violence in terms of bruises. It is time to acknowledge the internal scars of psychological and verbal abuse.
It's a gender-neutral crime. What actually happens is that your feelings, I loved my partner, those feelings get abused. It's wrong for a man to hit a woman. Violence of any description is wrong, so it wouldn't have solved it.
In court after an admitted killer is caught on camera smiling during his sentencing. A judge fed up with that casual attitude stopped the proceedings in a surprising move. 7 Action News reporter Shelley Childers live in the newsroom right now with what happened next. Shelley?
Well, Stephen, it's a case of a murdered Ann Arbor teen, and it was quite a shakeup in court today. The judge asked the prosecutor to throw out the sentence agreement and take this case to trial. There was a long recess as everything was put on pause because of this 17-year-old's behavior.
Donta Wright sat in court smiling and nearly laughing as a mother shed tears for her son, shot and killed by Wright.
I've lost laughter and love. I no longer have the hope of having grandchildren. I've lost the enjoyment of holidays and birthdays and of everyday life.
Wright addressed the court showing no remorse.
I just want to tell y'all, I'll be home soon. R.I.P. Keon. I love my family.
That's all you got to say?
Yes.
The judge, clearly fed up with the defendant's attitude, stopped the proceedings and asked prosecution to consider taking this case to trial, where Wright would face a stiffer punishment if found guilty by a jury.
But watching you sit there, smile and laugh and shake your head like this was no big deal, I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement. We'll go to trial, and if you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. That means you'll die there.
Ultimately, Jordan's family decided not to take this case to trial and to move forward with today's sentencing. The defense attorney apologizing on behalf of the 17-year-old.
His smiling was in no way meant as disrespectful either to the family, to the victim, or to this court.
Donta Wright was sentenced to 23 to 50 years for armed robbery, felony firearm, and second-degree murder of 18-year-old Jordan Clee.
Today we'll be looking at 5 fathers who took sweet revenge on men who did horrible things to their kids. These fathers' very understandable rage just boiled over and they took justice into their own hands. There's a strong debate about what should be done in these cases every time it happens, but it will be hard to find a jury that would convict these people. Since we have all thought about taking revenge about really small things, I can only imagine the emotions that you have to be feeling if something this horrible happens to you. Let's get started. In 2012 in Texas, an unnamed 23-year-old father heard his 5-year-old daughter crying behind a barn, so he went to investigate and found Jesus Mora Flores sexually assaulting his daughter. He pulled him off her and started beating him senseless. He pummeled him so hard that the man ended up dying, but not before the father called 911 trying to get some help to save the man's life.
911, state emergency. I need an ambulance. Okay. I need an ambulance. The guy was raping my daughter and I beat him up and I don't know what to do.
In the 911 tapes, he is heard screaming that the man is going to die, but they lived in such a rural area that the dispatcher had trouble finding his address. By the time emergency crews arrived, Flores was dead, and the case was investigated as a homicide. But in the end, no charges were brought up after a grand jury decided not to indict the father, which is the obvious conclusion in this case.
Force is authorized and justified in order to stop an aggravated sexual assault or a sexual assault. All the evidence that was presented by the Sheriff's Department and by the Texas Rangers indicated that that was in fact what was occurring when the victim's father arrived at the scene.
Raymond Earl Brooks had adopted a woman who had a young daughter, and he started molesting this girl, and it lasted from ages 4 to 8. It happened for so long that it became her normal. Brooks pleaded guilty in 2002 to molesting the girl, who was 21 years old when he was finally put in jail. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, which is already too short, but he only served 27 months before being granted an early release. After his release, the daughter said something to her dad, Jay Maynor, which she can't remember since it seemed so insignificant at the time, but the dad got so angry that he grabbed his gun and headed to Brooks' home. He found him outside his home and shot him dead. After he killed the 59-year-old Brooks, he was arrested. He pled guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. I completely understand his reaction, but during this entire revenge scenario, he also stopped at another shop where he shot at a man who he thought had also abused his stepdaughter when they were dating. And that pretty much ended his chances of any jury understanding his vengeful actions, since he got another 20 years for this attempted murder.
That was a step-grandfather, related to the child. Not, it wasn't blood, but when you're a grandfather, you're in that position where you're a trusted family member who had access to a child.
That's usually
she was 8 years. Wait, hold on. She was 8 years old when she came out and said it.
Right.
She said she doesn't remember when she started being molested, so she was probably an infant. And you know what? The original charge against that man was sodomy, and they took it off as a plea deal. You know what sodomy is? You're doing that to an infant, you will be dead. You do that to my child, I will shoot you in the head.
Father Jason Browning admitted to beating the shit out of babysitter Raymond Frolander in 2014 after the father walked in on Raymond performing a sexual act on his 11-year-old son. The father did the understandable, and upon coming upon the scene, he snapped and started beating the babysitter until he was unconscious. He was also planning on stabbing him to death, but his son stepped in and stopped him. 18-year-old Raymond admitted to having molested the son for 3 years. Raymond was actually a good friend of the family and would hang out with the son consistently, where they would play video games in the kid's room with the door shut. The father's rage is even more understandable since he himself was abused as a child while in foster care. The babysitter was taken to the hospital before being sent to jail, and the father will not face any charges, since the police stated that the dad was acting like a dad, and there is nothing to charge him for.
A beaten and bruised Raymond Frolander stood before a judge and didn't say a word during his first appearance in court. Daytona Beach police arresting Frolander for sexually assaulting an 11-year-old boy. This phone call to 911 happened shortly after.
I just walked in and found a grown man molesting, and I got him in a bloody puddle for you right now, officer.
Okay, sir. You discover that he has been sexually abusing him in your home. You know, father did what a father had to do.
David Barajas, his wife, and their 2 sons were driving home when their truck broke down 100 yards from their house. The father told the kids, David Jr., who was 12 years old, and Caleb, who was 11 years old, to get off the truck and help him push it home. As they were doing this, a 20-year-old drunk driver named Jose Banda crashed into them, killing the 2 boys. During the turmoil after the accident, gunshots rang out and Banda was left dead with a gunshot to the head. Now this is where it gets tricky, as it cannot be called an outright revenge, since prosecutors charged the father for the murder, but he was later acquitted after the jury spent only 3 hours deliberating. I'm not saying that the father killed Banda, but it would make sense since he was shot right after he killed his 2 kids. Prosecutors said that he walked 100 yards to his home and got the gun and walked back to the wreckage and killed Banda. Although the evidence for all this was extremely weak, since no witnesses claimed to have seen him do it, and he had no handgun residue on his hands, and the bullet fragments could have belonged to multiple weapons and not just the .357 gun ammunition that Barajas had in his house. Also, the gun was never found. I would completely understand if he did do it though.
It all came down to evidence, and in the end, the prosecution did not have enough to convince the jury that David Barajas pulled the trigger in an act of revenge. They also could not overcome the sympathy many felt for the father's loss.
In 1984, Father Leon Gary Pluchet shot and killed his son's kidnapper and sexual abuser while they were walking him through the airport back to jail in Baton Rouge. 25-year-old Jeff Doucette was a karate instructor who had kidnapped Leon's son and had taken him to California. Doucette had actually been molesting Jody for about a year before he kidnapped him. Leon the father struggled with the reports that his son had been sexually abused, so he decided to do something about it. News crews were in the airport and they recorded the whole incident. Leon pretended to be talking on the phone, and as police passed Doucette behind him, he turned around and shot him in the head.
Gary Pluchet shoots and kills him.
Officers immediately recognized him and asked him why he did it, and he just responded, "If this had happened to you, you would have done the same thing." Doucette died the next day in the hospital. Leon was given a 7-year suspended sentence after he agreed to a plea deal, pleading no contest to a manslaughter, with 5 years probation and 300 hours of community service. What do you think about Pluchet only getting probation for killing his son's abusers? Although this is classified as vigilante justice, I personally wouldn't have convicted the father of anything. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to Blue Jam, home of bad English and various crazy videos. Since you really liked that previous video I made about this similar topic, today comes the part 2. Today you will witness teenagers who made huge mistakes which cost them their freedom. Before we start, let's make something clear. Nothing, but nothing can justify murder, and anyone who does such a crime must deal with consequences. No matter if you're younger, you still need to take a responsibility for your actions. Some teenagers from this list realized what they have done, while the others simply didn't care. Is their punishment deserved or not? You be the judge in this case, and type your thoughts in comment section down below. Don't miss new videos. Hit the bell.
Hillman convicted of killing 64-year-old William McFarland after a road rage confrontation in southern Kent County last fall.
The teen accused of beating a man to death in a bout of road rage is headed to prison for decades. Christian Hillman learned today his sentence is between 22.5 and 100 years in prison.
The teen who bragged about the riches to police investigating the murder he's now convicted of today seemed like most other convicts. Jail orange and shackles. Evidence at trial showed that Hillman beat McFarland severely before boasting about what happened. It was enough to make Judge George Quist fashion a sentence worse than life. McFarland was convicted of second-degree murder, which has a maximum sentence of life with the possibility of parole. As for Hillman, the teen with the powerful defense team and means he felt worth bragging about.
You can hire anybody you want. It's not going to help your case.
5 high school students in Michigan are accused of throwing rocks off an overpass and killing a man.
Police say White, a construction worker, was getting a ride home in a Ford Econoline van around 8:30 p.m. last Wednesday. That's when a 6-pound rock, about 5 inches wide and 8 inches long, was allegedly dropped from an overpass and crashed through the windshield.
Good morning. The teenager who prosecutors believe actually dropped the rock is 17-year-old Kyle Anger. He's the one being held here at the county jail. The others are at a juvenile detention facility. They were all arraigned yesterday and are being tried as adults.
Suspects are 15 to 17 years old. They are all charged with second-degree murder.
The 5 teenage defendants were expressionless as their lawyers entered not guilty pleas for them.
My client has no criminal record whatsoever.
Their distraught families watched the proceedings. Officials say after the incident, the suspects went to McDonald's. Investigators say they found at least 20 rocks on Interstate 75. One weighed more than 20 pounds.
Even if they spend 30 years in prison, they get to wake up every single morning. They still get phone calls from their parents. They still get visitors. My son don't get none of that no more. That was taken away from him for something stupid.
Investigators believe the suspects also dropped a tire and car engine parts from another overpass nearby, damaging other vehicles. They were denied bail and are due back in court November 2nd.
In court after an admitted killer is caught on camera smiling during his sentencing. A judge, fed up with that casual attitude, stopped the proceedings in a surprising move.
Well, Stephen, it's the case of a murdered Ann Arbor teen, and it was quite a shakeup in court today. The judge asked the prosecutor to throw out the sentence agreement and take this case to trial. There was a long recess as everything was put on pause because of this 17-year-old's behavior.
Donta Wright sat in court smiling and nearly laughing as a mother shed tears for her son, shot and killed by Wright. Wright addressed the court showing no remorse.
I just want to tell y'all, I'll be home soon. R.I.P. Keon, I love my family.
Donta Wright was sentenced to 23 to 50 years for armed robbery, felony firearm, and second-degree murder of 18-year-old Jordan Klee.
Robert Gans says his 14-month-old grandson Noah Philhauer will never be able to heal from the injuries he received when he was intentionally dropped by 19-year-old Alexis Sexton.
I just want her to receive the maximum amount you can give for what she's done. It's not fair to him to have something to deal with something for the rest of his life.
I would like to apologize to all my victims. I am truly sorry. I wish them nothing but the best in the future. Your Honor, all I really want is to get help.
At her sentencing, Sexton spoke too, telling the judge she has a serious problem she can't control.
Several other family and friends spoke on Sexton's behalf, but in the end, the judge says because of the children she hurt and the seriousness of the crimes she committed, she had to go to prison.
A teenager could spend up to 2 decades in prison after her sentencing today for plotting to kill her family.
That's Jeff Sikorsky, the father of Roxana, following his adopted daughter's court appearance today. She was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison for attacking her brother with a knife as part of a plot to kill the entire family. Sikorsky, who is now 17, was involved in a relationship with Michael Rivera in October of 2014 when the attack plot unfolded. Rivera was 22 at the time. The judge said he victimized Roxana with inappropriate sexual behavior. 6 other felony counts were dropped when she agreed to 1 count of assault with intent to murder.
18-year-old Michael Fay received a life sentence today for the murders of teen brothers Blake and Blaine Romas. Before being sentenced, Fay addressed the court.
To say I feel bad is a huge understatement.
As part of a plea deal with Putnam County prosecutors, Fay admitted that he shot the brothers on May 9th of this year as they lay asleep in their beds. Prosecutors say that Fay first shot 14-year-old Blaine, who died instantly. Then he shot 17-year-old Blake. Blake did not die right away, and so according to prosecutors, Fay finished Blake off by strangling him. Family members shook their heads as Fay closed his remarks by professing his love for the 2 young men he admitted murdering.
Blake, you already know I love you with everything that's in my heart. And I'm sorry I took you away from your mom, your grandpa, and your grandpa.
Judge Russell Basinger was unmoved by Fay's remarks. He said his acts were ruthless and chilling and sentenced the teenager to 30 years to life for each murder to be served consecutively.
You will hearken to the sentence the court has awarded against you. The court, having duly considered your offenses, it is hereby ordered that you be committed to the Department of Youth Services until the age of 21, and furthermore committed to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Cedar Junction for the period of not less than 25 years and not more than life. 001. On indictment number 2014-109, the jury, having returned a verdict of guilty as a youthful offender on the charge of aggravated rape, you will hearken to the sentence the court has awarded against you.
The death of the 13-year-old comes just hours after folks gathered for a vigil for a 14-year-old killed last Friday night. Tariq Akbar was shot in the city's east side, caught in the middle of the fight over a girl on Facebook, according to police.
This is the teen who prosecutors say shot and killed 14-year-old Tariq Akbar near the lakefront Friday. Matthew McMillan's eyes filled with tears as the court commissioner read those charges. He added Akbar's murder is a heart-wrenching case all around.
It's a tragedy, and I'm saying this for the defendant's family, his mother, his father, his brother.
After the hearing, McMillan's brother told me he believes his brother is innocent, despite numerous witnesses.
You know, my brother, he come from a good home. He's good in school. He had nothing to do with this.
Why did you kill my baby? You ain't got a reason. Mother, you're gonna die in prison. I know. I know, but I have to live the rest of my life without my son. I know, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry to you, because you got what you cut. Green light on you. Ain't that what they said? Ain't that what you heard? Good. And I hope you suffer for the rest of your life.
You don't even know what it's like to be a father. You're just stupid. You killed him for no reason. You had no right. and I hope you rot in hell in prison for the rest of your damn life.
A judge agreed with a Warren County jury which sentenced 19-year-old Austin Myers to death.
Austin Myers showed no emotion as the death sentence was imposed. In fact, he showed no emotion throughout the entire course of the trial.
I think there's a lot of good things I can do with my life if you allow me to keep my life.
Myers and his co-defendant Timothy Mosley killed 18-year-old Justin Back during a robbery attempt at his home in Waynesville. Today, the judge imposed the jury's recommendation of death.
The court finds that the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the aggravating circumstance outweighs the mitigating factor. Therefore, the sentence of death shall be imposed upon Austin Gregory Myers on the charge of aggravated murder.
Myers once again showed no emotion.
It is the ultimate punishment reserved for only the worst crimes committed in our state. In Arizona, the death penalty is the law of the land, but that sentence is imposed right now out of sight, except for a few select witnesses.
Tonight, Troy Hayden takes us where television news crews have never gone before, inside Arizona's lethal injection chamber, to explain some of the mystery behind how the death penalty is carried out. Troy?
It's a very intense experience, John and Carrie, and I'm going to take you with us here. What we're about to see are the tools and processes used to take the lives of murderers who judges and juries have decided should die for their crimes. But these processes could change soon because of the problems states are having with getting these execution drugs. We'll have more on that in a minute. But let's begin with a walk through the gates of death row. George Pod 2, Browning Unit. The sign says condemned row, but it's better known as death row. All the men here committing crimes so terrible, the state has decided they need to die. Before we enter, we're required to put on stab vests.
Just right here.
And face shields. Now we're wearing the face shields. Why do we put the face shields on here?
We require the protective equipment of our staff based on the fact that we've had inmates that will dart or they'll throw bodily fluids on our staff.
Before inmates are allowed out of their cells, they're strip searched.
I'll pat shirts, make sure that they don't have anything in there. Make sure that there's nothing in the waistbands. All right.
They're handcuffed, made to back out of their cells. Even their showers are individual cells themselves. Death row inmates are never allowed to be in contact with other inmates.
You just have to have an open eye, be very observant when working in death row.
Stephanie Kruzka has been a corrections officer here for 4 years.
They'll try to say inappropriate things, and that's where you have to draw the line. And that happens a lot, so that's where I have to draw the line, is when they start making inappropriate comments.
Do you feel safe on the job?
I do, especially with my coworkers.
And let's show you a death row cell here. 10 feet by 12 feet, concrete walls. You got a bunk. Over here you got a desk, toilet area, sink area. There is an outlet where they can plug in an appliance or a TV. They do have access to cable. And this exact cell here is where they bring condemned prisoners 30 days before they're actually executed. Why do they use this cell? Because it's equipped with these cameras, and they can watch them 24 hours a day. It's in this cell where inmates eat their last meal, and that meal has to come from the prison kitchen. It's here where they decide who gets their belongings. And
we also want to know what he's going to do with the disposition of his body, whether or not we're going to, he'll have family pick that up or he'll be buried in our inmate cemetery itself.
In the hours before the execution, the condemned is moved from death row to the death house, this nondescript gray building. Its most striking feature, the smokestack that towers out of the top. That smokestack leads down to the state's gas chamber, which is still an option for some on death row. This is the witness room. You can see back here on the back side of the witness room is the gas chamber that actually a couple of the condemned on death row are still eligible to use if they choose that method of execution. Over here, you've got the lethal injection chamber, and it's a big glass partition here, and they've got black curtains that are closed when you first walk in.
And what I'm showing you are the holding cells where the condemned is brought to the day before the execution. So you can see the inside of a cell. There are two of them here.
There's a small area next to the holding cell where he can speak to his lawyers or clergy.
Up to 5 hours prior to the execution. If necessary, he could be provided a snack. If necessary, up to a few hours before the execution. If he wanted a sedative, that could also be provided. The inmate is escorted through the door from the holding cell, and then he is brought in to the execution chamber.
Department of Corrections Director Charles Ryan takes us into the lethal injection chamber, a place news crews have never been allowed in before.
So the witnesses will already be in the witness area, and they will observe on the monitors that the inmate is brought in, turned around, lifted, and placed on the table. Then authorization is given by me to proceed with injecting the other chemicals, and then we wait. I have a clear conscience in terms of carrying out this duty. And I do not have a professional problem in doing so.
Right now, Arizona is essentially out of the death penalty business, at least for the near future. Even though there are 4 men right now who have exhausted all their appeals and they're ready to be executed, a judge has put a hold on executions because of a lawsuit brought by inmates. And at the end of this month, all the death penalty drugs the state has will expire and they can't be used. Because state law requires executions to take place 35 days after a death warrant is issued, those drugs will never be used. And new drugs are very difficult to get. Now, Utah faced this same problem and passed a law to bring firing squads back if the state couldn't get death penalty drugs. So we conducted a very non-scientific Twitter poll, just threw it out there, and our followers overwhelmingly said they would choose to do the same thing here in Arizona. Our Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, said here on Fox 10, maybe we should explore alternative execution methods. And other high-ranking Arizona leaders I talked to said the same thing. But any change would have to go through a vote of the people.
Killer facing the death penalty does not want lawyers to fight for his life. West 2's Dave McDaniel following the sentencing phase of this. And Dave, why is this guy insisting that he face the music without any help from his defense?
Well, you know, it's an extremely rare situation. I talked with several veteran attorneys who say they have never really heard anything quite like it. Here he has attorneys ready to go to battle on his behalf, and he's telling the judge he doesn't want that help.
I in no way want an explanation or justification or even anything to be presented on my behalf to try to justify this tragedy.
David Russ already pleaded guilty to a brutal murder.
And the cause of death was either by stabbing or strangulation.
58-year-old Madeline Linen was killed in her own home. David Russ stole her car and her ATM card. Eventually arrested in Texas, his attorneys are ready to ask for mercy.
They were beaten for some minor infraction that their father thought they had committed.
Russ's attorneys say he was beaten his entire childhood. His family history includes some mental illness. He's a drug user. He is sorry for what happened to Madeline Linen. All things normally used by attorneys, things David Russ told a judge he won't use.
I'm not going to put the victim's family members through that. I'm not going to put anybody through that. I just don't feel it's fair to them. I've taken ownership from day one. Just as the victim stood vulnerable, I stand vulnerable.
Να προχωρήσω λοιπόν στο δεύτερο σκέλος, γιατί θέλετε να το αποφύγετε. Αυτό ο κύριος Στίγουλ θα μου πει μετά την άποψή του. Αλλά μιας και αναφερθήκατε στο DNA που κουβαλάμε. Δηλαδή, η αιτία των πράξεων μας είναι τα κύτταρα του σώματός μας, γιατί εκείνη το DNA. Και εν αυτή περιπτώσει, όταν σαπίσει το σώμα μου, θα σαπίσουν και όλες οι κακές καταβολές που έχω και θα αλλάξει μαγικά και η ψυχή μου. Δηλαδή, πώς δυνατόν τότε, αν ήταν έτσι που το λέτε, να κατευθύνομαι εγώ και να ευθύνομαι από την κακή λειτουργία των γονέων μου ή των προγόνων μου, τότε δεν θα προέκυπταν άγιοι, όχι από γονείς άλλους, αμαρτωλούς ή και κακοποιούς, αλλά δεν θα προέκυπταν άγιοι από τη μεταβολή ενός πρώην κακοποιού σε άγιο. Δηλαδή, τι κάνει ο Άγιος εκείνη την ώρα? Έχει το DNA του που τον βάζει να δολοφονεί και ξαφνικά με το ίδιο DNA γίνεται Άγιος. Άρα το DNA δεν έχει κανένα ρόλο, παρά μόνο όταν είσαι σαρκικός άνθρωπος, δεν λογαριάζεις το Θεό, δεν ακούς τη διαμαρτυρία της συνειδήσεώς σου και προχωρείς με το κρέας σου. Άμα είσαι τέτοιος άνθρωπος, φυσικά και η ψυχή σου ταυτίζεται με το DNA που έχεις πάρει. Το θέμα είναι ποιος έχει την ισχύ μέσα μου, το DNA ή η ψυχή μου. Και εγώ είμαι το DNA μου? Όχι. Το κληρονομώ από τους γονείς μου, από τους προγόνους μου. Εγώ δεν είμαι μέσα εκεί. Ούτε στο σπερματοζωάριο είμαι μέσα, ούτε στο οάριο. Τι δουλειά έχω εγώ εκεί μέσα που με βάλανε ή που μπήκα, γιατί εγώ έτρεξα να μπω. Βαδίζει εκεί. Όχι κύριε, εγώ θα χαράξω δικό μου DNA. Θα φτιάξω το δικό μου κοκτέιλ. Θα πάρω από τον πατέρα μου και από τη μητέρα μου αυτά τα στοιχεία που θέλω εγώ. Άρα λοιπόν έχω ευθύνη.
His attorneys are ready to ask for mercy.
They were beaten for some minor infraction that their father thought they had committed.
Russ's attorneys say he was beaten his entire childhood. His family history includes some mental illness. He's a drug user. He is sorry for what happened to Madeline Linen. All things normally used by attorneys, things David Russ told a judge he won't use.
I'm not going to put the victim's family members through that. I'm not going to put anybody through that. I just don't feel it's fair to them. I've taken ownership from day one. Just as the victim stood vulnerable, I stand vulnerable. I do not wish any mitigation be presented on my behalf.
I want what my son wants. I don't want him to die. You know, that's my baby boy. I don't want him to die. But at the same time, I have to respect his wishes.
As court broke up today, it's quite clear that the judge isn't sure what she's going to do. She ordered a pre-sentence investigation. She says she wants them to take at least 8 weeks to put it all together. She wants to know in writing everything she needs to know about David Russ. She even hinted that she might call witnesses on his behalf, whether he likes it or not. She wants to have an informed decision before she decides whether he lives or dies. Reporting live at the Seminole County Courthouse, Dave McDaniel, West 2 News.
Scott Dozier was convicted of murdering 22-year-old Jeremiah Miller in 2002 and robbing him of $12,000 that Miller had brought from Phoenix to Las Vegas to purchase materials to make methamphetamine. With less than a week before his scheduled execution, Dozier remains steadfast in his resolve to be put to death for his crimes.
He's just acquiesced. It seems, Mr. Dozier, you want your lawyers to pursue the removal of the paralytic, correct?
Yes, my statement today is that I want to absolutely go through with this on the 14th of November. I would request that we do it without the paralytic, but I, more than anything, wanted to get out on the 14th.
So we're coming up on Ely State Prison right here in Nevada. This is where Scott Dozier has been on death row for the last 10 years. He's waived his rights to appeal, and on Wednesday, he'll be first death row inmate to be executed using fentanyl, the opioid that's caused thousands of overdose deaths across the country. So you're going to be dead in 2 days?
Yeah. I am.
Have you processed that?
I mean, as much as a person can, right? I mean, that's a heavy-duty thing, isn't it?
Nevada is using fentanyl to execute Dozier due to a national shortage of lethal injection drugs. Nobody really knows how fentanyl will mix in this fatal cocktail, and ordinarily that would give Dozier's lawyers an easy angle for appeal. But Dozier, who was convicted of killing and then dismembering a 22-year-old drug associate named Jeremiah Miller in 2007, and of a previous murder in Arizona, is a rare death row inmate. He's volunteered to die. How do you feel about the state using fentanyl to kill you?
I think it's awesome. I mean, it's killing people all over the place. You guys get pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl and just bang me up, man. Use a shit ton.
Have you ever done an opioid?
I have, but they're not my thing.
Have you ever done fentanyl?
I've not done fentanyl.
It wasn't really a thing, I guess, back.
No, opioids weren't the rage they were when I was out. And I'm not a downer dude. I like uppers.
What do you say to those who say, Scott was convicted of brutally murdering people, and he's going to go out with a drug that's literally designed to make you not feel pain? Is that justice?
Look, it doesn't really matter at this point, guilt or innocence. I'm past all that. I came up against an entity that was bigger than me, and they made it clear that the behavior I was engaging in they didn't like, and I disregarded them, and now they're going to kill me for it.
Do you think you deserve the death penalty?
No, I don't, though, actually. However, I think that if Jeremiah Miller's family really thinks I killed him, they should have the opportunity to kill me. And so I guess maybe I do believe to some extent in an eye for eye. I mean, I know how I would respond if somebody killed somebody I loved, and I was sure they did it. I mean, like, someone raped your sister, the only thing you do is bail that person out of jail. You know what I mean?
You seem ready to go. What are you gonna miss?
I'm wholly counting on not missing anything. Like, the one thing I'm expecting from this is to be wholly unconcerned with this plane of existence. So if I'm missing something still, I'm gonna be either bummed out or super pissed.
What do you hope for your son? What do you hope for your grandkids?
That they're more successful in finding happiness and some degree of satisfaction and gratification in a life within the parameters, you know what I'm saying? That the ability, my inability to do that clearly is a sizable portion for me being here. And I just hope they're able to do that, you know what I mean?
You had died?
I didn't know at this point, and nothing was explained to me.
Were you questioning that? Like,
yes,
holy
like, where
smokes,
am
did
I?
I just die?
Right, like, why am I here? Where am I? At first I didn't realize, but it only took a few seconds, honestly, to realize where I was at. And nothing was explained until the way back, which I'll get to. But at this moment, then, I looked up and I saw these two enormous creatures in the cell. Well, they were demons, and so I knew right then, I'm in hell. I'm actually in hell. This is not a dream. I'm really here.
Foi como acordar de longo sonho. E logo descobri que não pertencia mais ao mundo dos vivos. Me deparei com uma surpreendente verdade. A vida é fonte eterna que passa por diversas etapas. Acordei numa dimensão chamada umbral, uma espécie de purgatório. E minha história estava apenas recomeçando.
The first doorway that I looked into looked like hell. There were people shrieking and screaming, and there were naked human beings strewn about, this horrid landscape with pools of bubbling excrement, and there's boulders, and animals were torturing people, and people were torturing each other, and, there were creatures with pitchforks.
Oh, my God.
And, erupting flame geysers, and it was the artist's classic depiction of hell.
Στα 23 μου χρόνια βίωσα την κοσμική ενέργεια, τη συμπαντική ενέργεια, μέσα από μεταβίβαση αυτής, μέσα από τον ειδό διδασκαλό μου. Όταν μετατρέπεσαι σε αυτό το φως, στο βαθμό που θα μετατραπείς, σε κάποιο βαθμό μετατράπηκα εγώ, όταν μετατρέπεσαι σε αυτό το φως, διασχίζεις το σύμπαν δυναμικά. Και καθώς το διασχίζεις, με όλη σου την υλική αίσθηση, την αίσθηση του υλικού σώματος, διευρύνεσαι και γίνεσαι το σύμπαν. Και αυτό γίνεται ανεβαίνοντας προς τα πάνω. Αναλείπτεσαι εκείνη τη στιγμή. Λοιπόν, όταν γίνει αυτό, από εκεί και πέρα, όλο το κατώτερο που βιώνεις είναι μέρος του νου σου. Ο νου σου έχει νοημοποιηθεί, ο νου σου έχει ζωή.
Και αυτή η ιδέα του να φτιάξω μια ιστοσελίδα η οποία σου παρέχει ακριβώς αυτά τα ερεθίσματα, μου ήρθε μέσα από τη δική μου εμπειρία βίωσης αυτού του οργανισμού, του ενιαίου και ενοποιημένου οργανισμού. Οπότε, πριν περάσω στα βίντεο, θα σας περιγράψω σύντομα πώς ήταν η εμπειρία αυτή. Έγινε πριν 26 χρόνια, στα 23 μου χρόνια. Ήταν μια εσωτερική έκρηξη που έμοιαζε πάρα πολύ με ό,τι αποκαλούμε πυρηνική έκρηξη στον εξωτερικό χώρο. Ένας εσωτερικός μου πυρήνας εξεράγει, άνοιξε ο ουρανός και με κατάπιε, εκτοξεύτηκα μέσα στο σύμπαν, το οποίο ήταν χώρο χρονικό, συγχρόνως χώρος και χρόνος, συγχρόνως ύλη και νους, και καθώς διεύρυνα τον εαυτό μου, προχωρώντας ψυχή, νους και σώμα, όχι αυτό το σώμα που βλέπετε, αλλά η εσωτερική ενέργεια του σώματος, μέσα στο σύμπαν, ενοποιούσα τις εξωτερικές ενέργειες για τις οποίες μιλούσα πιο πριν ότι ψάχνουμε όταν αναζητάμε την ευτυχία, τις ενοποιούσα μέσα στη δική μου ύπαρξη.
I take this seriously. I have fun with it. I do. I try to have as much fun as possible in the workshops. I make light of stuff, and people know that. But I take this seriously. This is the path. This is the path that we are all on. And if we don't, we will end up like billions of people have throughout history. They will make the great transition of death and go from the physical outer world, and they will move that far inward to a consensus reality, or territory, as Bob would say, on the astral. And they'll swear they're in heaven. When there's an entire universe of countless realities and dimensions yet there to explore and experience. But we have to open to this. We have to truly let go and become explorers of consciousness, not just readers of consciousness. And that is the leap, the great leap that we all must take.